Hi Lawrence. I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview of the Texa Marine Diagnostics. Touch on a few of the makes that you said would be useful, but also take a quick look at the ones that you've already got systems for, i.e. the Merc, the Volvo, but also look at the Williams tenders as well, because they look to have BRP or Sea-Doo engines, which we do have listed. So okay, let's start with the Texa software. So we're just in the main screen here. Obviously you can see we're in every different environment, but we'll head into Marine, and basically this is split down into inboards, industrial engines and generators, outboards and personal watercraft. So firstly what we'll do, we'll head into inboard engines. It's quite a simple system to navigate, but basically it's A to Z listing of all the makes that we can deal with. There'll be different levels of ability in each depending on Texa's relationship with the manufacturer, but hopefully we'll have a look at some of the ones that you talked about, and you can see how useful it's going to be. So firstly, we'll have a slow scroll down here and you can just see the makes. So starting with Caterpillar through to Cummins, FPT, which seems to be quite a popular engine these days, into some of the older engines as well. Obviously we've got MAN there, so we'll have a look at that in a sec. Mercruiser, Mercury Diesel, MTU, we've got Nanny in there as well, but obviously that's quite a simple blink code situation with Nanny. Perkins, Sea-Doo BRP, as I mentioned earlier, Scania, and even down to Volkswagen Marine, which I'm pretty certain there's not many of those about anymore, and also down to the Volvo Penta. The D's basically mean I've got demonstration modes, so I can actually pretend to be on an engine and show you how the system works. So we will go into that a little bit later. So firstly, let's scroll back up, or you've got a alphabetical list on the right hand side as well. So we'll click on MAN. So we'll look at MAN to start with. Basically, once you've clicked through the manufacturer, it gives you the model variants that we can talk to. Now we have experienced we can with some, if the specific model isn't mentioned, it can be a lot of the time found under a different one. But the Texa equipment's always being developed, so there's constant updates throughout the year and so on. So if there's ever a time that you can't communicate or the model isn't there, chances are we can work out which one it is. So just to give you an idea, we'll just click on the random one, the D2848 V8 engine. As you can see at the top here, it gives us the sort of listing of everything we've clicked through. It then here tells us which systems we can communicate with. So obviously we've just got the engine here. What it'll come up, we've got a couple of options, master and slave, and if we were to be on an engine, we could obviously hit start and that'll take us into that process. But just on the right here we've got a little indicator which tells us which cable we need to use, and also gives us a little video as to where that might be. Now obviously depending on who's built the boat, the chances are, I'm going to say about 80 to 90% of these are correct, but hopefully you'll know the vessels quite well, so you'll be able to know where these are. So what we do, we'd hit start and that will take us into communicating. Can't show you that at the moment, so what we'll do is just on the left hand side we'll look at what abilities we've got, or additional information, because aside from being able to just actually speak to the engine, look at live data or parameters, there's a lot of other technical information in the system which will help, in particular if you're working on everything and anything. So down the left hand side here we've got self-diagnosis, which we're in at the moment. We've also got special functions. Now what they've done is to separate this out. So for example, we can do a cylinder compression test and a cutout test on this particular engine. So basically similar to the general communication, we just hit the start and that would then take us through the process of what we need to do. Depending on again which make and model will determine how many of these we may have. Next on the list is wiring diagrams. So on this particular one, we've got it on the body computer and the engine itself. So we'll just click through into this. These are all done in-house at Texa. They're all interactive. I'll just open that as well. There we go. So you can see we've got a few wiring diagrams there. So we'll go to the one with more on it. So you can see just while I'm moving across, you can see the lines of communication are being highlighted, or the connection information at least. You can see that's coming up. But you can also, if you highlight over the component itself, it tells you what it is. It also tells you a lot of the time the location. As you can see on that boost pressure sensor, it's in the suction pipe. Now if I were to click on, for example, that wire there, or that connection information there, it'll then tell you how that's connected, and obviously that goes directly into the ECU, but you see on the left hand side here it tells you how it's connected. Now obviously if we've got something a little bit more that isn't as straightforward, maybe for example, to be fair, this is quite a simple diagram, but you get my understanding. You can see, for example, these, how they're all connected to the main ECU, and it gives you that rundown on the left hand side. So again, that's quite useful. Also, when you click on these items, we've usually got a bit of information on each, whether it be specific information for that component, or at least a check sheet of what to start testing for. So for example, on this one we've got an image. It's a parts image. Sometimes you'll actually have a picture of the component on the engine itself. We've also got a data card. So we've got here high pressure fuel metering solenoid valve. So what this technical info will then give you a bit of information on that component, how it's all put together. I'll just do that a little bit slower. So you can see there's a bit of technical information in there, just showing the flow. Yeah, so a bit of information to help you there. Now everyone is different, it's not always the same. This manual mode that you see here, that's when we're starting to go into oscilloscoping, an add-on that you can have for the Texa at some point if you wished. Just along the top bar here, obviously we can print these out, you can save them, because essentially we're working on a Windows 10 tablet. You haven't seen that, but everything is Windows based, so we can save that as a PDF, or you know, plenty of options. But if we click on the legend at the top, that then gives us every component on this particular diagram. So for example, we can click on the magnetic common rail injector of cylinder number 2, and what will happen is that will take us to that component. Oh, hold on, let me try that. There we go. Right, okay, so I didn't see that come up. So I've just clicked on 3, and then it's taken us to that component. So you can close that, and then again you can start looking at that particular component. On this, again, it gives a bit more information about the common rail injector, operating principle, measurements, and then again we're heading down into oscilloscoping, so at least you can see a waveform of what it should look like if you were to start oscilloscoping to check its workings. So let me just close out of that. So obviously we've got wiring diagrams if it's showing in the system. If not, you know, there's a good chance that Texa will be able to obtain a specific wiring diagram if you're after it through the technical support line. What we've also got down here is technical data sheets. So sometimes this will have sort of pertinent information on inherent issues with the engine, faults or fixes that people have come up with. So for example, on this we've got an incorrect hour reading dash on the dashboard, which obviously seems to be a common thing. So again, we've got details of why that is. Boat engine configuration, again, technical information here that you can refer to, just so you can understand how the systems work, which will help your diagnosis obviously. But you can see there's quite a bit of information in there. I won't concentrate too much on that, but you get, hopefully you understand, you can see what abilities are there. What we've also got is nominal values and guided diagnostics. Now this is where when we're communicating, we're getting fault codes, we're getting MID codes or FMI codes for Volvo, for example. And this is where you need to know a bit more information about what they mean, but also what to do next. So on this, like I said, they're calling it guided diagnostics. So for example, you're getting a fault saying there's something wrong with the RPM sensor, for example. That will then basically, using a multimeter, it says, but it'll give you the test conditions, what to probe for, what sort of values you're going to be looking for, the cause and results of those tests. So that's quite detailed. Again, you can see there's quite a few on this particular one. All the sensors, fuel temperature sensor, same situation again, test conditions, how to probe, and so on. So hopefully get the idea from that. We'll look at the Volvo ones later, because in fact Volvo, we're incredibly good with that information. So we'll show you that in a sec. Just down here we have got a customer management system where you would be able to save your whichever boats you're working on. You can actually save them in the system, so you're going to be able to build up a history of every time you plug in, communicate, what information, what faults you're getting. You're going to be able to create printouts or health check sheets for the customer, so they can see what it was like when it came in, and then also what it was like once you've done your fix, and giving it a clean bill of health. A useful system which I'll show you briefly later. So you can see we've got quite a bit on there. What we'll do, we'll just head back up to diagnosis, back into inboard engines again. While we're in here, we'll look at Caterpillar. Caterpillar, I'm sure you're aware, they're a little bit more careful about their information and who they give it to and so on. So for example, we'll click on a 3406. Now we can communicate with the engine, there's no doubt about it. We can look at live data, and potentially we can perform some activations or tests, but essentially on the left hand side you can see we don't have any wiring diagrams or technical data to assist you, but at least you're going to be able to look at what the engine's doing and what the sensors are doing. So that's in there. While we'll stay in the inboards for the moment. I know we wanted to look at Yamaha, but we'll stay in the inboards. We'll just have a look at Volvo while we're here. So down to Volvo. Also, I've got, this is a good example because I can actually put this into demonstration mode so you can see what it's doing. So you can see for the Volvo Penta, we've got a lot of the older engines in there. I'll scroll down as slowly as I can. Into obviously the D6s, the D9s, the more common ones that we're seeing. We've got all the IPS systems in there as well, and even down to some of the TAMD and CAD engines. Obviously not a great deal of electronics on them, but they're there to communicate with. So let's just scroll back up. We'll pick a D6, it's always a good one to go for. So you can see here we've got a few more systems that potentially we can talk to. So engine compartment and instrument panel. Same format as before. You're always going to see the same format no matter what engine you're talking to. So we'll look at this in a sec, but we'll head to the diesel injection. We'll kick that off and I'll put it into a demo diagnosis. Now whether this will come up with any faults that I can show you until I dial in, I honestly couldn't tell you. So basically it gives you a bit of an explanation. Put the system or the EVC system into the OEM mode. Usually just there is actually a technical sheet on how to do that, but I'm sure you're well aware of how to do that. With Volvo there is a protocol of about 2 minutes. Even though we're in a demonstration mode, it still has to go through that process. So we'll just give it a second to populate all the information. Okay, fantastic. Right, so we're loaded into you'll always be taken to the fault screen. So you can see we've got a few faults that it's come up with. A mixture of information there. Takes a works traffic light on a traffic light system, so if there's an active fault it'll be red. If there's a memorized fault, something that's happened in the past, it'll be an amber. Normally we can clear those, but I'll be honest, some of those will stay until we've actually sorted out possibly some of the related active faults. Now just on this screen you can see we've got the ability on the bottom left here to print. We've got access to technical information there. We can save this, going back to the customer management system. We can hit save on that and that will save all that information, and then we can also try and erase there. Okay, so for example we've got the engine synchronization confirmation fault there, so we can double click that, look at the particular code that's related to it, when it happened, first time, last time, but also how many times it's happened in the count there. So we can hit confirm there. And what we can then do, now we know that code, which was the 12898, we can then look in the technical information here under the nominal value sheets, guided diagnostics, where are we? Engine management, engine control unit 128, PPID 98. So we can then click on that sheet. That will then give us a bit more information about what that fault means. So basically it's coming down to a wiring or potential connection issue, so it'll just give you that information that you need as to what to do next. So quite useful, and you can see on here there's a big long list of error codes, whether it be common rail injectors, again explaining the meaning of the diagnostic trouble code, but also the tests that you can start to carry out to check continuity, and so on. So you can see there's quite a bit of information in there, and as we scroll down, same deal, water and fuel sensor, boost pressure, temperature sensor, there's a lot of information in there for you to look at. What you've also got here is vehicle sheets. So this is where there's a lot of information about the EVC control units, what I mentioned earlier about just having being able to put the engine into the OEM mode. That will be in there as well, just down here, enabling OEM mode. So it just takes you through guidance as to how to do so. Down there, okay. So you can see just from looking at here, guided components check system, calibration information for the control levers. Again, lots of advice and instruction for you there. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just head back out of there. So we're back into here. So obviously, like I said, we can try and erase those, but what we obviously want to do is start looking at the live data. So what it'll take a second to populate, but you can see what will happen is we've got a reasonably decent description on the sensor itself, and on the right hand side we've got a measurement and the unit of measure itself, or a value in the unit of measure. Now with each of these we can double click and create a line diagram. Much easier to see a peak or a trough rather than a change in number on the right hand side. So where this comes into play is where you're going to be able to take these out on sea trials, and you're going to be able to monitor the sensors that you think are at fault. So the way we can do that, just down here on the bottom we've got a filter button, so we can pick just a few sensors that we want to look at. For example, pick those at random. We click OK. That then gives us a few less sensors to deal with, but what we can then do is take us into being able to do up to a 30-minute record. So like I said, take it out on sea trials, record those sensors. It gives you a nice printout as to how those sensors have performed in the allocated time. So quite a useful little system. So we'll just come back out of that and uncheck there. What you've also got just here on up and on the rest of the tabs, we've got statuses, so just switches, but good because you can at least see if the systems are, the continuity is good. So we can scroll down there. ECU information, so it will draw whatever information it's got in there. Again, this is the sort of information you can print and save for the future. Activations wise, I'm pretty certain, yeah, we can't do much, or it's saying we can't do this or much on this particular engine other than error cleaning. Just back to the parameters again, as well as obviously the sensor readings, we should sometimes have operation time, total fuel consumption, and so on. So a lot of that information, in particular on the outboards, is very good, as is, compared with the genuine dealer tool. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the sort of screens you're going to be looking at. Just on the right hand side here on the fault screen, if there's a wiring diagram specific to that error, and it relates to a wiring diagram or a wiring issue, that will highlight in blue. You can click that and that will take you to straight to the wiring diagram and that component that, as we were looking at earlier. On a lot of the later engines, we've got freeze frame technology, so basically if a fault occurs, we can see what was going on with the engine at the time that fault occurred. So very useful information. The other two things we've got here are question marks, which again help towards the guided diagnostics, so giving you advice on what that fault is, what you can do to start testing it. And similarly, those question marks will come up in the parameters as well. So if you're looking at a reading and thinking, well, I don't know whether that's a good reading or not, you'll start to see these question marks here, which will guide you as to how good that reading is. But to be honest, a lot of the time, it's through experience that you can obviously pick up what readings, if they're spurious or way out, there's something awry. So we'll just come back out of that. And what I want to do is, we're sort of in the inboards at the moment. Let's just head to diagnosis and we'll go to the outboards. We'll head down to Yamaha down here. So again, in exactly the same format, we've got a list of all the models that we can communicate with. I'll be honest, I don't think there's going to be one out there that isn't in there, but the coverage is pretty good. Okay, so we'll click that one, for example, and again on the left hand side, similar types of information. Obviously we've just got the engine itself, depending whether it's for US or European. So again, nominal value, diagnosis information there, but also technical data and maintenance. So we've got technical specifications on that particular one. So again, it'll give you information about the engine, even down to tightening torques, oil quantities, and so on, and even layout there. So useful, quite a bit of information there, and again, plenty of wiring diagrams to look at there as well. So you can see exactly the same format as before. Looking at the main ECU, for example, we've got, and similarly to many of the others, we have connection information. So if you know it's a problem on pin 9, you know where that pins back, or which component pins back to that on the ECU. So that's very useful information to have. Just come back out of that. So the other, in the outboard side of things, in fact, if BRP and Sea-Doo, I've got them listed under inboards, but I've also got them listed under personal watercraft. I don't know how big that tender, the Williams jet tenders are. I realise some of them are small, so they'll probably be covered under the personal watercraft, but it's a Rotax engine from what I can see. But you can see under here, we've got the Sea-Doo personal watercraft options. Alternatively, obviously, we go into diagnosis, inboards, and then down to Sea-Doo here. Again, we've got Speedster, Challenger, Wake, and so on. So connection wise, we can definitely do it. I've looked at the diagnostic port on the Williams tenders. It's the same as the Texa one that we would be looking at. So it's just a case of making sure that it is correct. So this then obviously gives you a detail as to which cables we need to use. So there's quite a bit of information there. So yeah, hopefully that'll give you a bit of an idea. Obviously it would have been nice to be able to plug in while I was with you on the island, but I will be out in a couple of months' time. So yeah, okay. Lastly, just briefly, is the customer management side of things. I'll just come out of there. We'll head to customer management. This is where you're going to be able to, like I said, save the information on the engines you've been working on. So for example, I've got one here where in February we were on a D6. This was last year. So basically what we've done a self-diagnosis, and we've recorded the errors that we looked at while communicating. So what it'll do, it'll populate this sheet with all the information on the engine, and then you can see we've got the faults listed below there. So this would be your pre-sheet to show the customer, and then once you've done all your fixes, you can then do a re-health scan, and then this will obviously be clear. But again, we've got date, time, all the details of the engine in there, so it's a good professional sheet to provide to the customer. And obviously, you know, depending on how long you look after the boat, that history will increase. So okay, thanks a lot.